Boomers whose children don't talk to you. What's stopping you from picking up the phone and talking to them? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I work in healthcare, and sometimes you call a patient's adult children and they politely ask that I do not contact them again. I trust that they have their reasons. I was an ED social worker, and we had this happen a number of times with elderly patients who came in stroke heart attack, trying to find next of kin who could help make decisions regarding escalation of cares versus DNR/DNI. I'm sure they had their reasons, but I definitely remember some really heartbreaking calls. As I told everyone when trying to get one made, no one plans to be in the hospital unexpectedly and incapacitated. The directive only takes effect if, when you have been rendered incapacitated or non-decisional. And should those states reverse, all decision-making returns to you, even if the medical team thinks you're making a bad decision. So make sure you have one, and if your parents are up there, make sure to have them. There are a lot of good resources online discussing these things. Story 2. I once had a job where I was involved with hospice, and there was a new admit to hospice who was afraid she would be kicked out of hospice because of her husband. I also remember a woman who said her husband came home with divorce papers the day after their youngest child graduated from high school, and had no idea why. She also said that two of their 5 children sent her Christmas and birthday cards with no return address, and the other 3 sided totally with him and had nothing to do with her. She told about being at the mall and seeing her daughter enormously pregnant and pushing a stroller with a toddler in it, and she didn't even know her daughter was married, and yes, her daughter was married before having her kids. Let's just say that her husband must have been a saint to put up with her for as long as he did, most likely because he was protecting the children from her. Story 3. All of my kids are adults and very busy with their own lives and families. None of them are really talk on the phone types, and they know when I call it is important. I have health issues that limit my ability to go out and visit, and I also work third shift, 6 p.m., 3:30 a.m., and my hours don't really match up to being too active with them. I live in a loft and do not have much room to have them over, but I do try to text my daughters a couple times a week and play online games with my boys and chat with them on Discord. I've also learned to ask how they are all doing seriously, and not just updating them on news and health. I truly love my kids, but things are much different in my life. Being 60 plus and single, I imagine differently, and own up to the fact a lot is on me. Story 4. Bad communication skills mainly. I'll admit my oldest son and I have never been very outwardly affectionate, but we've always had a good relationship as adults. We'll go weeks or a couple months without talking sometimes, and it boils down to neither of us realizing that the other was wanting to hear from them the whole time. I was a military father, serving on Navy submarine for nearly 3 decades. I was constantly away or unable to be present in my children's lives. I'll never regret my service to my country, but I will regret all the time I lost with my family and the relationships that never developed as well as they should have. I wasn't raised in an affectionate family like my wife was. I've had to do a lot of reflecting at this stage in life to realize that maybe I actually wasn't the best or most supportive father I should have been. Luckily these days our relationship is better than it has been in several decades, and I'm beyond thankful for it. Story 5. My dad says kids call the parents. Kids visit the parents. The only time my dad ever initiates the call is birthdays. Close to, but not on the actual date. My son's B-day is 4 days before mine, so he'll call in between those dates and say happy birthday to us both. In order to have a relationship with him, and we have a good one, I have to put in all the work, even though I am way more busy than he is too. He has a landline, and half the time I call, he isn't around, so I'll leave a message telling him to call back, and he never does. So annoying. Story 6. On the other end, my mother tries to call every few months and texts maybe every other month. Occasionally there will be radio silence for a year or so. I don't answer. I'll never truly forgive both of them for what they did and didn't do. I don't know how a mother could watch a grown man beat a stepchild and put them on the street with nothing, then blame me 10 years later for not coming back. And it's not our fault you took it seriously. A single phone call to apologize for his actions would have changed the trajectory of my life. So they do call. It's just way too late to make any difference. Story 7. My grandfather was fearful of the reaction and couldn't get over his pride and admit his faults. I was with him when he passed away earlier this year. I know he loved all of his children and grandchildren. He was sorry for hurting them but couldn't admit it fully. Especially towards the end with his dementia, he'd start to say something and then forget. I'm the only one who knew how much he was hurting, and unfortunately it did not go down well with my family trying to explain it. He was far from a perfect man. He made a lot of mistakes, but he loved and was proud of all of us. Story 8. Gen X here. My mom is mostly deaf, but she doesn't wear her hearing aids. When I'd go see her, we'd talk for 5 to 10 minutes with her constantly asking me to repeat myself before it occurred to her to put her hearing aids in. On the phone it's the same, but she has a talent for turning the volume on her phone down and not being able to turn it up. She'll claim it's broken, but the problem is that she's just turned the volume down. Phone calls are useless unless my brother goes over to mom's place to answer the phone for her. I've considered setting up Skype on her PC because I can log in remotely and set the volume and such. However, she can barely use her iPhone, and she keeps forgetting how to use email. I don't even want to try to teach her to use Skype or FaceTime. It's sad because mom was always quite computer savvy. She got email in the mid-90s, when she was in her 60 seconds. Now computers and cell phones are vastly easier to use, but her memory is going. Story 9. I do call, I text. She doesn't respond. She found a replacement for me. She has a loving husband and I'm incredibly happy for her. Her dad came back into her life after 15 years and moved in with her. He is now doing to her what he did to me. He separated me from my parents when we were married. It lasted until I realized it was his insecurity. He is now doing it to our daughter. I have to wait it out. If I contact her, it starts the clock all over again. She says she will call when he's ready. It's been 5 months. She isn't ready, but she is seemingly happy. So I am moving on too. I will accept her back when she's ready. I wish she could figure out how to have all of us in her life and be happy. Story 10. Child of a boomer. If my mom calls and I don't pick up, she spends the entire time between when she calls and I call her back worried I am dead in a ditch somewhere. So we decided I have to call her or she'll spend literally an entire day spiraling. She does text me, but that's easier because I have a smartwatch and I can send her a 1-letter response or emoji when I'm at work, so she knows I'm alive until I text her back more fully. Story 11. My partner's parents always complained that she was a bad daughter for never coming to see them, but they live an hour away from us and were always cunts whenever we'd go see them. Aside from the history of physical and psychological abuse my partner suffered as a child, they did things like, after her grandma died and the will was settled, they called her on her birthday and told her to drive up to their place for some news. The news was that they weren't giving her any of the inheritance. Now, the money would have been useful as we were saving for a house, but really it's neither here nor there. If they just never mentioned it and never gave it to her, it'd be fine. But calling her on her birthday and having her drive there for big news, when the news was basically, well, that's just what they were like, and in the end, my partner said she was mainly just surprised that she was surprised by it. On my end, her dad wanted some help with his laptop once. His laptop, specifically designed to be portable. But would he drive to our place for me to help him? No, we had to drive 1 hour to them in order to do them a favor, and when we got there he made us do chores around their place as well. So yeah, we went no contact with them, and they reckon it's our fault and that my partner is a bad daughter. I can't wait until they're dead. That inheritance will be the only good thing they ever did for my partner. Story 12. I had an uncle that didn't talk to his kids. He wasn't a boomer, he was older, and his kids are just slightly too young to be boomers. It was a complicated childhood, and they didn't want to talk to him after he left their mother, never them, according to them as well. They told him to stop calling, so he did. He said he understood where they were coming from, but he deserved to be happy too. He never called first to break the silence that had built between them, and it lasted for over a decade. However, he wrote letters to them every week. He respected that they didn't want to talk to him, but refused to accept that they never wanted to hear from him again. He was stubborn. So he thought about it long and hard, and spoke with my grandmother about it. They agreed that letters would work. It came in the mail, and then if they wanted to read it, they could. If they didn't, they could toss it out. No harm, no foul. But they would know he thought of them every time they threw one away. After 12 years, the kids called him, and he told them he wouldn't be the one to call first, because they said not to, and until they said otherwise, they'd have to call him. Eventually, everything was rebuilt and it was fine, but it was one time where I saw someone get it right. Story 13. My dad exclusively calls and texts when he knows I'm at work, He doesn't actually want to talk. He wants to be the victim when I don't pick up. How does he know I'm at work? I've had a 9 to 5 for 20 years. When he complains why I don't answer, I copy and paste the same message I've used for the past 5 years. I'm at work until 5. He once called me 4 times at 1 a.m. because I was off work. What do we talk about when I do answer? Well, I don't talk, he does. And it's always about the money he would give me if I would visit. He's getting older, you know. Not much time to visit. All this for an hour, never asking about me or my life, then hanging up because he's tired of his constant stream of consciousness blather and doesn't actually want to hear what I have to say. Too bad he abandoned me as a kid, refused to have me on his custody weekend, only called me 4 times in my 20 seconds to ask for money, and now wants to try and start being a dad at newly 60. He only started actively calling me as of 24 times a week, rather than the old quarterly texts. Story 14. My in-laws didn't speak to their son for a couple years. They even went to grief counseling. He was addicted to meth. At one point he was living at a meth house, and he had an old car parked at their house, and he claimed it had something in it that put his parents in danger. Dealers or something were going to go and kill his parents. Looking back, we're pretty sure there was never a real threat, and he just hadn't slept in days. His parents paid thousands for a nice rehab place to help him get back on his feet. They'd supported him financially for years before. Well, he walked out of the place and started walking down the highway. Wound up homeless in Florida, bouncing around different drug houses. The reason they stopped Fallon from him is because abuse was too painful to get their hopes up over and over again. They cut him off and gave up. Luckily, he got away from Florida. He's now doing landscaping in California. In his case, he's messed up so many times and so badly that it was on him to mend things. He's since been in touch with his parents, and they're rebuilding the relationship. Story 15. This is a deep dive comprehensive guide to the phenomenon of mostly boomers, whose children disowned them, and they claim they did nothing wrong. The whole website is a wealth of collected data, breakdowns of data, and inferences that can be made from that data. Most data was collected from estranged parent and grandparent rights forums, basically a circle jerk of self-absorbed, manipulative people with authority fetishes, claiming they were amazing parents and encouraging others in those communities to insult their kids and make them feel better about themselves. Hope this helps shed some light on the subject and deters others in this community from believing comments that summarize to, "I have no clue why my offspring wants nothing to do with me. I wasn't a bad parent. I am a victim." Comments. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below.